The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back. Bock score from Nedick's at the Old Garden on 49th Street. Hal Bock is the man. George Case III is here, and we have kind of a special show. It's about something that George Case devoted his life to. That's the athletic footwear business. And you had a great article in the New York Times that you're referring to, George. And,
hello.
Hey, there's David joining us. We're going to talk athletic
George.
footwear tonight, David. And
Good.
George Case and Hal Bock, go at it.
Well, this is George, and I just wanted to, first of all, I wanted to thank Hal for sending that article. I did not see it, and he was kind enough to send it to me. It was about a 2-page spread last Sunday in the New York Times, and it was all about really the running shoe business and an awful lot of information about Nike and their new shoes, and it hit home with me because it stemmed from my beginnings in the athletic footwear business. After, I graduated from college, I was able to get a job in the sporting goods industry, and I was very happy with it, and saw the whole development of the athletic footwear business beginning in 1968 with the Mexico City Olympics. And I just thought we could, talk a little bit about the history of that and where, a company like Nike is today that is really dominant in the athletic footwear business, although when I was in it at the beginning, Nike did not even exist as a company. And I know a lot of people probably find that hard to believe, but that's the absolute truth.
And we're not talking a million years ago. This is 1998.
No, we're not.
Yeah, but it's 50 years ago. If you realize.
the Mexico City Olympics were in 1968, and Nike made its first effort into the athletic footwear business. I believe it was in 1970 or 71. So it's very recent when you look at it. And I knew some of the principles involved at the beginning, and what Nike has evolved from where they were when they started to where they are now. A dominant, absolute, giant in the athletic footwear business as it exists today in the United States and in the world.
Now, everybody thinks that Nike was made famous by Michael Jordan, and that's not really true.
No, it's not. They piggybacked with Michael Jordan to really make a name for themselves in basketball, but they really started as a running shoe company out in University of Oregon with Bill Bowerman and their great miler who later passed away in an accident, Steve Prefontaine. That's where Nike really got the business going, and it was in the athletic footwear business as far as running. It really did not have anything to do with basketball, and I'll go over that a little bit because I was also partially involved in that aspect of it as well.
Well, who did you work for, and how did you get it? You said you got into it after college, but
right. Well, David, what it was I graduated from Rutgers with 2 young children, and I had an ambition to play Major League Baseball, but my dad said to me, he said, with youngsters, and if you were single, that's one thing, but you're not, and the fact is you've got to provide support for those youngsters, and my advice is try to get a job in a field that you like, that and it just so happened, my dad had a sporting goods store. After he retired, I sort of grew up in the sporting goods business. I interviewed with Pro Keds, which was my first job in 1963. They liked what I had to say, and, I went from there. So I was fortunate because I was in the business side of sports rather than the playing side of it for my entire career.
Hello, gentlemen. I'm sorry I'm late.
Your career lasted a lot longer than your baseball career would have in any case.
Well, you're right about that, David. You know, my dad's career was only 10 years or 11 years, you know, and he was forced to retire because of injury. But, you know, so many ball players, if they're in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years at maximum, that's about it. I was fortunate because I was in the athletic footwear business for more than 35 years.
Wow. You know, you mentioned Keds. I had an aunt who worked for U.S. Rubber Company down in Rockefeller Center, and that was the manufacturer of Keds in those days.
David, believe it or not, that was where I worked out of. It was at 1230 Avenue of the Americas.
Right.
It was known as, it was U.S. Rubber Company, and then they changed the name to Uniroyal. And it could be that I even, knew your relative because that's where I started and where I had my first interviews and that kind of thing. And it went from there. Then it was, the product themselves initially when I was there were manufactured up in Naugatuck, Connecticut. And they weren't really in the performance athletic business at all. They were really in the children's shoes and women's. And my background, I guess I convinced a few people that they needed to move into the athletic footwear business, and I might be the guy to get them there. So I was fortunate because I was riding that horse at a very good time.
I got a new pair of Keds every spring because my aunt was able to get them for us. You know, it was only a couple of dollars. I know the building well. I worked there one summer in the basement where they had a photo engraving company that did all sorts of artwork for the various museums and businesses around, and I was a runner. But it was my aunt at U.S. Rubber who got me that job for the summer, my first year in college.
David, such a small world. I remark about it all the time, and that's an example. I mean, my first interview was at 1230 Avenue of the Americas. I walked in right out of college, and they had called me up, and they said, why don't you come up for an interview? So I went up to, I don't know what floor it was, 30th floor or something like that, shaking like a leaf because this was my first experience. I walked in and started to talk to somebody who just happened to be a baseball fan. He said, damn, he said, I remember your dad. I used to watch him play. And, from that point on, the door was open and I was able to walk through it.
That
was the address, all right. Yep.
Okay, we're going back to a day when all these shoes were manufactured in the United States. Who was the first company to kind of go to China, if you will?
Well, what happened, Ralph? It's rather interesting because we've really become a consumer rather than a producer. And when I started, all the product was made here, and then I think it was maybe Keds, Pro Keds, maybe Nike, maybe Adidas. I mean, they all started to manufacture offshore because they were able to get a much better price manufacturing product in Korea or in the Philippines or in China than they were in the United States because of the unions and because of the high cost of wages. So that's where it went. And it was sad to see because the plant that we had our product initially made in Naugatuck, Connecticut, that virtually shut down. And, all the production went overseas, and a lot of people, lost their jobs because of the economics of moving from, Naugatuck, Connecticut out to China or Korea or Japan. It just, even with the extra cost of transportation and lead times, the companies made a much better profit than they did when they were making shoes in this country. And it wasn't just my company. It was Converse. It was B.F. Goodrich. It was many of the domestic manufacturers. And as far as I know today, there's only one athletic shoe company that's making any product at all in the United States, and that's New Balance, which is a running shoe company. And their products are made up in Maine. As a matter of fact, not too far from where our summer place is.
Now, how are the prices affected? Do New Balance pay a price, if you will, for dealing in America? They must have.
Yeah, well, the thing, and Hal will, I'll let him talk a little bit about this because the article was amazing. When the shoe business started, most of the what we called price points were, $9.95 for a canvas basketball shoe, $20 for a little more substantial shoe. But then Converse first came out with a leather basketball shoe called the Dr. J. And that sort of revolutionized the athletic footwear business. And that shoe at the time was selling for, I believe it was like $49.95, something like that, which was a, very, very high price at that point. However, what's happened since is that now Nike has really dominated with Michael Jordan, and kids were buying the Air Jordan basketball shoe and paying $150, $200 as a street shoe, and it was a status symbol. And now the running shoe business, as the article and what Hal sent me, Nike now has a new shoe called the Vaporfly that, believe it or not, is selling to marathoners, ultra-marathoners, Olympians, all that kind of thing, for $400 or more for a pair of shoes.
Oh, wow.
Which
George,
to me...
I have a question for you, George.
Yep.
Can a shoe improve performance?
Well, you know what, Hal, that's an interesting concept. Now, this whole, article that was in the New York Times said something about Nike's new Vaporfly would increase performance by like 4%. And on the other hand, when you read it closely, they're talking about, these are ultra elite runners that are using that kind of shoe. And the shoe itself, they said, start to lose its effectiveness after 100 miles, which is nothing. On the other hand, they're talking about 500,000 ultra marathoners, Olympians, and so forth worldwide. That's a very, very small percentage, but Nike uses that as a focal point for their product because that swoosh is so visible, and a magazine called Runner's World will feature that. This New York Times is an example, Hal, that you sent me. There's 4 or 5 photographs of runners wearing Nike shoes, and Nike is not paying 1 cent for that. That's 2 full pages of editorial comment, no advertising at all that Nike had to pay for, but yet they're going to benefit dramatically from it.
I think their slogan that they came up with was very effective also. Just do it.
Right.
Just do it. And that's a very effective slogan.
Well, they did. They've been Nike, and I, tip my hat to them because they've been wonderful, aggressive marketers. They've had tremendous athletes. They've built some tremendous programs. But as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, they really started as a small running shoe company and really have branched out and developed into a worldwide athletic shoe brand.
Can we
I remember covering the Olympics in Atlanta in 1996.
Right.
And Nike, it was a Nike house. They had taken over a building, and the day after an athlete won his gold medal, the next morning he was available to the press in their building. What a great deal that was,
Wow, yeah.
You knew you were going to get access to these guys.
Right. Hal, that's the one thing that Nike has done over the years. They really, what some companies have not done, but Nike has done it extremely well. They've marketed their athletes, and the Michael Jordan is an example. Another example, which didn't really work for them, but he's still being talked about, but was Tiger Woods, because Nike had no golf shoe business at all. They decided that, Michael Jordan was going to retire. They were looking for the next, Michael Jordan. And all of a sudden, Tiger Woods is on the scene, a great golfer, happens to be an African American. It would get Nike into the golf shoe business, which, they made a good run at it. And then, of course, all the troubles with Tiger. But Phil Knight, stayed with Woods, and he's still, when you watch any of the golf tournaments, he still has his Nike hat on, his Nike shirt, wearing his Nike shoes. He's a very highly recognized spokesperson for the Nike brand.
Well, I'm not a golfer, and I don't really follow the sport, but I do know this, that no matter what tournament he plays in, the cameras are going to be on Tiger Woods.
Right.
That's true. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Imagination.
40%.
Well, they are, and and David and Ralph and Alan, that's the philosophy of marketing athletic footwear. You get your product in front of the public as many times as you can, whether it be playing or whether it be interviewed or whatever. For instance, the Nike swoosh, the Adidas 3 stripes, the Puma, the Puma logo. All those things are seen, and they really start to make an impact at retail. And that's the whole key to this, is selling shoes. So if Michael Jordan is on, or LeBron James is wearing a new Nike shoe and the kids know about it, that's the shoe that they go in to the stores asking for. And
how do you feel? I'm sorry.
And runners, and here's another example with runners. 500,000 elite runners is really a very small universe, but Nike is really using that to drive the average person who maybe wants to go out and run a mile or 2 miles or 3 miles a day, not even thinking about a marathon, but when they go in to buy a product, they see a Nike swoosh on the wall. They're not looking to spend $400 for this new Vaporfly, but they might spend $60 for a new, good-looking, cosmetically changed running shoe that really has an effect and meets their criteria when they're looking to make a purchase in a sporting goods store. And that's what drives the business, is selling shoes, and how they do it and how it happens is through exposure that the average person, it might be subliminal, but when you're seeing that swoosh all over the place, eventually, if you're going into a store and you're going to see that swoosh on the shelf, they're going to say, damn, that's a good-looking shoe. I think I'll try that. They might have
and it's not just for athletes. I mean, you look at the workforce. People wear sneakers, I still call them sneakers, to work.
They do.
Women will wear them, as they commute to work and then put on heels or whatever when they get to work. But the idea of so-called of sneakers as athletic shoes, it's there, but it's spread out so much that the market has grown exponentially.
Oh, it has. David, it's millions of pairs. And the fact is that Nike, I'm not sure, what their bottom line is, but they're about a $10 billion conglomerate. $10 billion based on athletic footwear and clothing.
I wonder though about the spread into collegiate sports, because now a lot of the athletic shoe companies are providing the shoes for the basketball teams, and making sure that the logo is there. And it's sort of semi-pro kind of concept to me.
David, I agree with you, and absolutely. And we've talked about this before with the scandals at Louisville and the fact that coaches, but coaches were on staffs of athletic shoe companies, and I have to thank him for it because I started it in in the early 70s. I came up with a Pro Keds advisory staff of college basketball coaches. And Nike followed my lead a couple of years later, and they did it. But what they did, they came with big bucks. I was very limited. I remember I paid coaches back then $1,500 to be on our staff, and they thought that was terrific. Well, a couple of years later, and now you've seen the thing with Rick Pitino and Joe Paterno when he was at Penn State, and Krzyzewski at Duke. They're making millions of dollars in their athletic shoe contracts, which then provided total athletic footwear for the entire, school. All their teams, all their programs is what they call the Nike school. And that's what Nike has invested their money in. So at the professional level, they're using a LeBron James or a Michael Jordan. At the college level, they're using a major basketball shoe school. At the worldwide level, and here's another example. If you take a look at the recent World Cup, a huge amount of Nike and Adidas advertising was built around those great world-class soccer players with the type of product they were wearing, because those companies wanted those athletes to be in the forefront the minds of kids when they're going in and they're going to buy a soccer shoe. They want to buy a soccer shoe that they've seen in the World Cup because they think that that's going to make them a better soccer player.
And what better sport to advertise? Everybody's looking at the feet the whole way.
They certainly are.
I mean, that's marketing. That's marketing 101.
It is.
So they do a terrific job of it.
Well, in soccer, they could put the logo on shirts and things that fortunately has not they've not been able to do in major American sports. But if you look at the shirts of soccer players, it's all advertising. But again, I mean, they're into every sport that's available.
Well, they are, and David and Ralph and Alan and how what it is, and I don't mean to dominate this conversation, but this has been so much a part of my life, just like baseball. The athletic shoe companies, they always were looking for a spokesperson that would drive business into the stores. So, Michael Jordan was a perfect example because he was articulate, he was a great player, and the kids all wanted to emulate. They wanted to be like Michael. Well, now LeBron James has picked up the mantle, and now he's the next Michael Jordan, with probably his own shoe. And Converse, they used Magic Johnson and Larry Bird and Dr. J. We happen to have, the next generation. When I was there, we had Pete Maravich and Lou Hudson and Tiny Archibald, and we had a pretty good stable, Spud Webb, of basketball players. But part of the deal is that you take those players, you're not just, having them wear the shoe, but you actually take them into schools and clinics and summer basketball camps and talk to kids and show kids. And then if in fact the kids are then going into and watching on television, and basketball is key that way because it is a sport that's up close and personal. And the kids see what players are wearing what shoes, and they know, as opposed to NFL football and Major League Baseball, because you're much further away from it. And when you're looking at the cameras, watching on television, they're not focused on the feet. They're focused on guys spitting sunflower seeds and changing their batting gloves and doing all this kind of stuff. But in basketball, they're focused on guys that are wearing the shoe being so visible on camera, and the kids are going to these games, and they're up close right next to these players.
George, I'm curious about something. When you said you were at the forefront of enrolling coaches and getting coaches to embrace your shoe, when you walked into a coach's office, this was never done before. No. Did they look at you a little crooked and say, "What? I'm not going to do that"?
Well, I'll tell you what. It's funny you mentioned that. Yes, they did, and yet back then I can remember talking to coaches, highly thought of Denny Crum at Louisville and Johnny Orr at Michigan and Tom Davis at Iowa. I became good friends with him, but when I first walked in and I explained who I was and showed him our new shoe and that kind of thing, and I said, "Oh, by the way, we're putting together a coach's staff and we'd like to have you part of it." Well, this was a big ego trip. And the money was not really even thought about. They were just happy, $1,500. It gave them some prestige. It gave them products for the team, and yet we asked them to do things for us. I mean, we wanted them to speak at summer camps and clinics, and it wasn't just a matter of using their likeness in advertising, but we really wanted them to work for that $1,500. Well, as it turned out, a couple of years later, I remember getting a phone call from Denny Crum. And Denny Crum had been John Wooden's assistant at UCLA, went to Louisville. We're paying Denny Crum $1,500. Well, he calls me up one day and he said, "George," he said, "I got to tell you something." He said, "I just had a conversation with the Nike rep, and they're going to pay me $100,000 if I can put Louisville in Nike basketball shoes. What do you think?" I said, Denny, take the money." I said, "Take the money." I said, "Anybody offering you that kind of money, you'd be crazy not to accept it." But that's what happened in a few years after when I started, paying college coaches a few bucks, and then Nike decided that they were going to go after the business big time, and they had a heck of a lot deeper pockets than I did.
Did you ever go to your bosses at Pro Keds and say, look what Nike's doing. Why can't we put some money into this?
I did. And I went to them almost on a daily basis, Ralph. The problem is that the parent company was Stride Right Shoe Company. They were a children's shoe company. They never had to spend money to promote. It wasn't what they called advertising. It was promotion. And, they just felt it was much too, high a price for them to pay. They had no background doing it. I was able to have some success, but on a very limited basis. And, so be it. Nike, they said, hey, that's Nike's business, and that's where they're going to be successful. And I wished I could have competed with them more effectively, but, my hands were tied. And yet, I could understand the Stride Right Shoe Company, they never had to spend millions of dollars to pay anybody to wear their shoes.
Right.
But of course, U.S. Rubber had a much larger business in automobile tires.
Right, the tire business. They were one of the major tire manufacturers. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. And they also, now let me tell you one other quick story about that. They also made golf balls. And Neil Johnston, who had been an NBA player, a great player back in the 50s with the Philadelphia Warriors. Well, Neil was 6'8", became a good friend of mine. He was the U.S. Rubber Uniroyal golf ball salesman, and Neil used to laugh. He said, George, I go into these pro shops to talk to the pros about golf, and all they want to do is talk to me about basketball.
He died very young.
Yeah, he did. He did, Ralph. He was playing a pickup game with his kids and died of a heart attack in his driveway.
Wow.
Much like Maravich.
Yeah,
Pete Maravich,
very similar. Yeah. Pete had Pete had a congenital, he had a heart defect that they never diagnosed. He was playing a pickup game in a gymnasium and ran down the floor and dropped dead.
Yeah, Johnston was a 3-time NBA scoring champion.
Yeah, he was. His nickname
the most demanding game.
Yeah,
on the body, running up and down.
Well, he was, and he was also very, he was really undersized, but that's the way the game was played back then. I mean, Neil was about 6'8", had a great hook shot, and
I think he blew his knee out.
Yeah, he played with George Yardley and Paul Harrison and a lot of those, Bob Pettit, a lot of those great NBA stars. But George Mikan was the one big guy who was 6'10" or 6'11". But the next tallest was a guy like Neil Johnson, and they used to call him Lantern Jaw because he had a very prominent jaw.
Yeah, I remember that. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, just a wonderful guy. I loved Neil Johnson. He and I became very friendly because of my baseball background, his basketball background, and we used to really talk about that. But Neil was a good friend. He was a real gentleman, and I was really saddened when he died because he died at a very young age.
Did he live in the Philadelphia area since he played that ball there?
He was, I think he originally, I can't remember, David, where he was, but he did live in the Philadelphia area, when he was playing for the Warriors. Now I don't recall exactly where it was when he died, but Neil, like I said, it was a pickup game with his kids in his driveway. So.
Wow.
George Mikan couldn't make the transition when they put the 24-second clock in.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it was, Alan, because, Mikan was, he wasn't that,
mobile, I know, yeah.
Well.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a big, bulky guy. And I mean, his job was when he played was, they get the ball to him underneath, and that would be it.
I think they put the 3 seconds rule in because of him.
Yeah, I think they did, because he would plant himself under the basket and, he could stay in there forever. But when they had the 3-second rule, then obviously, he had to move out a little bit. But, a totally different game than what you see today in basketball.
Oh, of course,
When you see guys that are above the rim and doing all the kinds of things they did, well, back in that era, 50s or 60s, you had great players, but they were outside shooters. And
absolutely.
The big guys were... they were rebounders, and that was their job on a missed shot. But, there was no specialist. There was no three-point line.
No.
It just didn't happen that way. So you had terrific outside shooters, the guards, the Kuzis, the Sharmans, those kind of guys. And then you had the big guys underneath that if they missed, their job was to put it back in.
Yeah. Kuzi had that great one-hand set shot.
He sure did.
Down the court. And
yep.
Bob Shays had a great set shot, yeah.
Which you never see anymore.
No, of course not.
Understanding that I'm old and overweight, if I put on a pair of Air Jordans, would that make me a much better basketball player?
It would make you 4% better.
Al, it would make you look like Mikey, and that would be about it. I guarantee you.
Right.
That's what we used to laugh, because that was the whole point of the marketing. I mean, the kids, they recognized Michael Jordan. And if you're a kid who's 15 or 16 years old, you're walking into the store, man, I'm going to bet, and, I'm going to be the next Michael Jordan. I'm going to go out and buy, his $150, $200 shoe. Well, he might be sadly disappointed because there are about 10 million other kids doing the same thing.
Yeah.
One of the things I recall about the shoe industry is, in my era, we all had what they now call high tops, but they were the Keds sneakers, and you just laced them up. Nobody had a name for them. And then I think it was the Stan Smith. You mentioned the leather top low cuts. Stan Smith. Those were really popular for great.
That was a tennis shoe.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
It had a green background to it. I remember.
Yeah, and then for a long time, high tops were out, and the low cut ankle size shoes were in. And now I notice that it's gone the other way. In fact, it's become a sort of fashion plate among a lot of the teens to wear these high retro sneakers. To wear these high top sneakers again. So what's old is new again, I suppose.
Well, it does, David. It goes around like that. I can remember when I was playing college basketball and when I was in the business at the beginning, a lot of kids went to low cuts because they felt they were quicker, they could jump higher and that kind of stuff because the shoe was a little less, a little less weight. But you sacrifice support. So then a lot of them went back to, to high tops, and I can remember trainers, they used to, tape and wrap a lot of guys' ankles and that kind of stuff, because on a low cut, you had a tendency, you would roll your ankle. Where a high top, it would give you more support, it would lace across your ankle, and the prevalence would not be to really, turn your ankle like it would in a low cut. So, and you're absolutely right. Today, if you look at the NBA and look at the colleges, all the players today are wearing high tops.
Yep.
On the other hand, what you also see when I was playing and I was in the business, basketball players wore shorts.
Short shorts.
Yeah.
They wore shorts, and a lot of them had long socks. Well, you look at the NBA and the colleges today, these guys are all wearing these huge baggy shorts. And some of them are wearing shoes without any socks, where the socks don't even come over the top of their shoe. So it's become a fashion look. It's become something that's totally different in the way the products are marketed today as they were when I was in the business.
Yeah, when you see guys like Chamberlain and Russell in those tiny shorts that just cover their backsides, you say, "Oh my God!" They did, and that was the style, man. That if you went out in shorts, that's what you wanted to wear. You didn't want to wear anything down to your knees.
Absolutely. I can tell you for a fact that's the way it was. Just like in baseball. If you look in baseball, when my dad was playing, and for years and years before that and after that, baseball players, they wore their baseball pants mid-calf. Well, you look at baseball players today, most of them have their baseball pants all the way down to their shoe tops.
Right, like dress trousers. Almost, yeah.
People call them a pajama bottom look, and that's what it does. They look like pajama bottoms.
Yeah. Well, you used to have to put those pants on.
Up, and
you had to put them on up, but you had to put them on backwards so that they would hold onto the sock, and then you'd pull it up over onto your waist, so that it had that little balloon effect down where the two met. And now they just put them on like a pair of pants.
They do.
Dad had to wear all those wool uniforms, right?
Yeah, sure.
Well, that's what they were. Yeah, they were. They were. And actually, we're getting back to like basketball and track. I mean, there's a lot of development now, not only in footwear, but in the apparel. So you're looking for lightweight, you're looking for apparel that will breathe. One of the early companies was a company called Sand Knit, and they came out with double knit baseball uniforms and double knit football uniforms, which were totally different from the all-wool flannels that were worn for many, many years.
Oh, yeah. It's amazing how those guys wore those things in the middle of the summer.
Yep.
Now they're starting to go to advertising on uniforms, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. Now, we're a company that really did that, Under Armour. And Under Armour, they took the Nike blueprint, starting with shoes and starting with clothing, moving into shoes is what Armour did, where Under Armour did, where Nike started with shoes and moved into clothing. So they worked the reverse, but it was basically the same premise. So Under Armour has become a very, very well-known brand of athletic clothing where they didn't exist 10 years ago.
Yeah, New Balance has a contract on the caps. If you look at the back of the Major League caps, there's a little logo
New Era
back there. Yeah,
yep.
Yeah.
New Era.
New Era.
And the NBA players who are wearing corporate logos on their uniforms. I remember distinctly watching these past seasons playoffs. The Celtics had the GE logo on all their uniforms.
Really?
Yeah. It's starting to go that way, and I think that they're looking at what happened. If you look at tennis and skiing and that kind of stuff, they were walking billboards. And,
well, because they don't get the sponsorship or the money to train adequately. They need those sorts of things. The Major League ball players don't need that.
Well, they do, and it's also, if you look, I think where it really started, and it had nothing to do with athletic footwear or sporting goods business, but look at NASCAR, and those race cars are emblazoned with corporate logos, and the drivers' uniforms that they're wearing. If they go and they're spreading the champagne or whatever it is after they win, they're full of logos. And I happen to think, at some point, this is what's going to happen with basketball, football, baseball. You're going to wind up seeing, and if Alan says it's already started, you're going to wind up seeing a lot of corporate logos on uniforms.
Well, you see it on stadiums now. And what happens, Progressive Field used to be Jacobs Field. And
they call that naming. They call that naming rights, and that's what happened.
That's right.
There's just a few stadiums that have, they don't have naming rights, but looking at say Yankee Stadium or Fenway Park, but most
and
of
Wrigley Field.
The new
there was a story a couple of years ago. A couple of parents that wanted to sell the naming rights to a newborn kid. and the judge wouldn't allow it. Yeah.
Hey, David, I don't know if you mentioned Wrigley Field. That's probably the original naming right.
Well, Wrigley owned the team and he owned the field and he manufactured chewing gum. So it was natural. A lot of those old stadiums were like Ebbets Field, Charlie Ebbets. They were named after the owners of the field. The last one that I can think of was actually, Shea Stadium was, named after a person. You don't get too many of that anymore. It's all corporate.
Forbes Field was
really
a war general.
Yeah, and the worst part of it is,
it's really become corporate because the corporations are able to go to a stadium or a college football or whatever. They go and say, hey, my naming rights, I'll give you the naming rights to the stadium. It'll cost $5 million. Well, if you got deep pockets and you're a major, a manufacturer or a major company, $5 million, that's not anything. And,
the worst,
they'll spend that kind of money.
And the worst part is the contracts are for 5-10 years, something like that.
Right.
So I know, for example, where the Baltimore Ravens play, their stadium has changed names already, and and why in the world would the Houston Astros be playing in Minute Maid Park when Minute Maid is an orange juice from Florida? I mean, and so it's very difficult to remember.
Yeah, they were originally Enron.
Yeah.
The stadium was down there.
Well, sure, Enron.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to be called Enron.
No. And basically, they turn over you can't keep up with this stuff.
That's right. Exactly, Al.
Because they turn over.
Yeah.
I mean, when I went first in 2003, the first year of the new ballpark in Cincinnati, I was visiting a friend of mine, went to a couple of games down there. I said, the Patriot, and then you look across the river, and there's the downtown Cincinnati, and there's a building, Great American Insurance.
Yeah, sure. Now, Riverfront Stadium was a nice name because it was on the riverfront.
Right. Yeah, Synergy. It became Synergy. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's terrible.
Yeah.
Because it does, the worst part is that it changes from time to time, and then you have to, remember a new stadium, and you can't refer, like Citi Field now. I mean, it sounds like a nice non-committal name for a ballpark, but it's named after Citibank, bank.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
in fact,
I'm with you
guys.
When
I was working for the Transit Authority, I suggested that they take their big stations and sell naming rights. But
well, some
that was
do.
Beyond their thinking. Yeah, that was beyond their thinking.
Some do. They've talked about that here in D.C.
Yeah.
The metro stations.
Right. Well, you know what? I'm with you guys on this whole thing with naming rights because as much as I've been somebody who's been around baseball in my life, I really can't tell you some of the names of some of the ballparks. I can tell you.
Nobody can anymore. But in the early days of that, I once
the corporate, names and the naming rights that like you guys are talking about, they sign a 3 or 5 year contract. Hey, when that contract's up, the naming rights could go to the next highest bidder. So
when that first started, I wrote I was writing a trivia contest for our local Saber meeting here, and I wrote a naming rights question. This is the real early days of it, and it got such a bad response. I never, in the subsequent times I wrote the contest, even when I wrote a few nationals, I never asked one of those again.
Yeah, well, there's talk here of selling naming rights to Nationals Park in D.C. Right. It's probably going to happen. I can't believe it's going to stay the way it is. The Lerner family is a big building. I mean, if they wanted to name it Lerner Field, I could understand that because they own the team, they own the grounds, but and to sell off the naming rights. They don't need the money, I don't think. That's my point. But I don't know for sure. Yeah.
No, but basically because the football team down there is FedEx Field.
Oh, well, that's a fiasco to begin with.
They don't call it the Meadowlands up here anymore. They call it MetLife Stadium.
Yeah, MetLife Stadium. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So even if they don't have it for a while, they'll eventually get it because it's an income stream.
Sure, of course.
Yeah, it is.
Of course.
It's an income stream, Alan, and David and Ralph and how it's an income stream for the ball clubs, just like the luxury boxes, just like all the concessions, just like, all the fan shops. That's all an income stream. Everything.
Yeah, well, I don't mind those things so much because when you read a sports article about a game being played at, say, FedEx Field or Progressive Stadium, Progressive Field in Cleveland. I mean, it's kind of annoying, I think, because they're getting free advertising in the newspapers.
They are. And when a club wants to build a new stadium, what do? They go to the taxpayers and say, hey, we're going to move. If you don't give us the money to build a new stadium, we're going to move.
Yeah.
Boom. All of a sudden the money comes in. The taxpayers are paying the bill. The concessions are huge. The naming rights, the seating privileges, the fan shops, the luxury boxes, all this kind of stuff.
That's why they built the new Yankee Stadium because the old one didn't have any of that.
That's right. You're right.
They did now, and that's why my memory of going to Yankee Stadium was the way it used to be. And
me
2
too.
years ago, I went and I was shocked. I said, "My gosh!" And what David has said, it's really a ballpark surrounded by a shopping mall.
Yeah.
Yeah, by a food court.
I couldn't even stand it when they did the renovation, which they did in the mid-'70s.
Yeah, well, they tried something. I mean, that wasn't.
I know, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's still better than the new one.
Yeah, and at least they tried to work on the same footprint. And with the new Yankee Stadium, they just blew up the old Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, well, the point was to get rid of those obstructed view seats and use cantilever style design, which didn't exist back in the 20s when they built Yankee Stadium. But basically, when they when they started the multi-purpose in the 70s, the only place that did it right at that point was Kansas City. They built the two separate stadiums, one for the Royals, one for the Chiefs, and both of them are still going. And all the places like Pittsburgh and Cincinnati and Philadelphia had the multi-purpose. They all had to build separate, well, they were donuts.
Years ago.
That was
they called them cookie cutter stadiums.
Cookie cutter, right? Yeah.
Because they all look the same.
Yeah. The only way you know the difference is by the advertising.
Fenway Park and Wrigley Field have survived.
Yeah.
Right.
And they're beautiful as today as they were 100 years ago. They're landmarks and they're God. I only hope that they don't do anything to those two ballparks.
Well, they have done a good deal of refurbishing of Wrigley Field.
Same with Fenway,
Fenway too. That set of seats up behind the green monster there. But doing it internally doesn't bother me. I do object to these constant name changes, and an interesting aspect is the Giants and the Jets playing in the same stadium. You talk about getting bang for your buck. I think that's a pretty good arrangement.
Yeah, well, I had that with the Cardinals and Browns, and they had that with the in baseball, Cardinals and Browns shared the original Busch Stadium, Sportsman's Park. You had the
Sportsman's Park. Yeah,
the Phillies moved into what became KMX Day, and they moved in there in 1938. And so that they had it. I mean, when Boston had the two teams, the Braves Field was totally inadequate after a point of being a major league stadium.
Hey,
well, when it comes to, we started this discussion about, the athletic footwear business and all that, but it really carries over into everything we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Sports today are driven by money, and no matter what it is, you put a dollar tag on it, and that's what it's become. Where, many, many years ago, the money was not anywhere near the same. If you look, and I've mentioned this before, if you look at a contract that Joe DiMaggio had, or Mickey Mantle or Ted Williams or Stan Musial, they were being paid $100,000 a year, which people thought was outrageous. Well, today, a rookie who's just starting in his major league career is making $550,000 without any track record of performance.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I remember when Koufax and Drysdale held out together.
That's right.
56, and they're demanding, I think it was $125,000, and they settled for $110,000, and everybody, this is an incredible amount of money. But you're right, George. And the context of today, it's nothing.
The Jets drafted a quarterback, Sam Darnold, from California, and he just signed his contract the other day. $30 million. He hasn't taken a snap yet. $30 million, and I believe $20 million guaranteed.
Oh, wow.
And he hasn't taken a snap. He hasn't been tackled once yet,
But it's all guaranteed.
It's all out of...
Well, on him, it's all guaranteed, yeah.
All guaranteed. That's good. That's nice. Good for him.
Yeah.
It's even worse.
When the Pirates made a trade today with Tampa Bay,
good.
and anyway, somebody put down that you should have gotten rid of either Polanco Marte, who are two of their starting outfielders. They're on their RBs were bought out. They're making about $5-6 million a year, and that kind of contract now is considered team friendly.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Another team could pick that up without having to worry too much about going over the luxury tax.
Yeah.
I
know.
That
tells you what the economics of the game is.
Yeah, it's insane. Yeah.
It's not like you need a shortstop and I need an outfielder and you make the trade. It's how long is this guy signed for? Is he eligible for arbitration? Does his contract have team options or player options?
That sort of stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
You have to buy that out.
Yeah.
Hey, and this all started with George.
Time is running short.
Into a college coach's office, right?
Yeah.
That's how it all started, right, George?
Hey, I'm guilty. I'll never forget.
George's fault. Yeah.
It's my fault. I was making a sales call one time out in Minnesota. I'll never forget this. And the store owner, he had some Nike, he had some of our shoes, and he said, by the way, George, he said, I want to show you something. He said, you made the Nike book. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, they did a whole history of the athletic footwear business and Nike's position in it, and you were credited with giving Nike the idea about getting into the basketball shoe business by having an advisory staff.
Oh, wow.
I hope you're getting a commission.
You're immortal.
The guy gave me the book. I said, hey, I got to take this book home. I want to show my kids.
George, terrific.
George, fascinating stuff. That's why I didn't want to interfere, because what you were talking about, this whole thing, was very fascinating.
Well, I appreciate that, Alan. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, George, real quick, could you bring us up to date on the shoe scandal that was so prevalent in the early part of the year?
Well, I said a couple of weeks ago, it's really been quiet, and, I'm not sure what's going to happen now. I guess maybe because, they're not allowed to really talk about it because it's still an investigation, and, they haven't brought anybody to trial, but it certainly, opened people's eyes as to what's going on, and it really had a dramatic impact on Patino. He lost his job. The AD at Louisville lost his job. An Adidas executive who handled all their basketball promotions, he was, I think, put in jail. So, I think there's smoke, but there's no real fire yet. But I have to think it's going to happen once they get really investigating this, because I've said before, it's deep. It's much deeper. It's been going on for a long, long time, and now it's really coming to the front. And it's those major basketball programs and to some extent football programs that are really going to be affected by this. It's not going to be the Division IIs, the Division IIIs, the mid-level majors. As Hal and I have talked, I guarantee you that NYU will not be investigated for their basketball shoe program.
No. That's why they stayed Division III.
Right.
Division III, that's right.
I remember talking to the former president at NYU, and I said, hey, why don't we get a basketball team back there? He says, not on my watch.
Right. Yep.
Also,
if you want to do it, you really got to commit, and it's what we called in the business an arms race. You really, how much you're going to spend, how much is the other guy going to spend, what's it going to cost you, what's your cost of entry, what your promotion dollars, your advertising dollars, your sales. I mean, that's what it really looks at, the bottom line. Yeah. And a company like Nike, they're going to say, hey, if we're spending $100 million in advertising and marketing, it's worth it because we've now become a $10 billion corporation.
Yeah. Well, one quick comment. If Hal's like me, I miss those old Thursday nights at the Garden.
You and me both.
Yeah, I used to go to a bunch of those also. Yeah.
Yep.
I miss the double headers when you'd have
the double headers, right?
Tuesday night pro double headers.
Yeah.
Yep.
NBA double headers. $3, you couldn't beat it. $3 in the mezzanine, $3.50, you couldn't beat it.
You go to an NBA game in the afternoon sometimes, Sundays especially, and a Knicks game in the afternoon. And if you hit in the
that's when they had the holiday festival and the college tournaments that they brought in.
Yeah, well,
the Knicks would play in the afternoon a couple of games. Yeah.
Great.
And the Rangers would play at night.
Yeah.
Hey,
no, the Knicks had Tuesdays and Saturdays for the most part. The Rangers had Wednesdays and Sundays. Friday was boxing. Thursday night was college basketball. I think Monday basically was professional wrestling. They had all the nights covered basically.
Yeah. Wow.
Those days, yeah.
Hey guys, could any of you, or do you want to address the social phenomenon of kids being ripped off of their shoes?
I thought of that while we were talking.
No.
And I said, I don't want to go there. I think it's just an outlier. I don't think, it was a status symbol. Sadly, it took on the aspect of criminal activity. But I didn't want to bring that into the history of.
Well, I agree with you, David. I didn't want to bring it in either. And I can tell you that the athletic shoe companies, no matter who they are, they never develop their product based on that.
No,
absolutely not.
No, that's what the kids have come up with. It's become a status thing, and they were willing to, kill or maim or whatever it is to get that product. I mean, it's become a horrible situation that developed as a result of the popularity of a certain athletic shoe. I mean, if a shoe is being worn by a kid and he spent $150 and he wears it on the street, he's taking his life in his hands because it could very well be that somebody's going to knock him off because they want a pair of that shoe.
That's right.
Well, now it's cell phones.
Yeah, okay.
That they kill them for.
Well, one final note, like the old 3 balls to designate a pawn shop, I learned that a pair of sneakers thrown over a telephone wire or something, hanging there, is a symbol that you can buy drugs nearby. So,
wow.
Yeah.
You know what? David, I never heard that, but that's become a street part. I mean, in Philly, they did the same thing. In New York, they would throw their sneakers over the wires. But I had no idea that was an indication about, where you could buy drugs.
Yeah, no, it really was. Yeah. And, I mean, how that came about is a very interesting question. I mean, why sneakers of all things? But I was told that from some people who were knowledgeable.
Oh. Hey guys, good show tonight. Anybody want to close with anything that they neglected to say? Start with you, Al Blumkin.
No, same bad time, same bad channel next week.
Oh, okay. But I want to go around the room a little bit. And any incomplete thoughts? Hal?
Well, no, David took me back down memory lane with the mention of Thursday nights at the Garden when you had college doubleheaders, and we had some great times.
Yeah,
it was a lot of fun.
Yep.
Whenever I hear a Happy New Year, a Happy Christmas, whatever, I always say Happy Hairston.
Yeah, Happy Hairston.
That's right.
Yeah, of blessed memory, as they say.
Right, absolutely. Good memories. Good days gone by. Here's to the future, though,
He played baseball. He played baseball, too, for NYU, Hairston.
No.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Didn't know that either.
If you guys have any Vinnie Ernst story, not Vinnie Ernst, Reiner.
Mark Reiner?
Mark Reiner.
Oh, yeah.
Transferred from North Carolina.
He later went on to coach
NYU.
Canarsie High School in Brooklyn.
That's right. That's right.
And he had some great success. He passed away a few years ago.
Yes.
Correct. Very young.
Yeah. He coached Queens College or Brooklyn College, one of them, after a number of years after his NYU career.
Yeah, I remember a guy there named Al Barton who seemed like he was there for 7 years.
His son played for the football Giants.
Al Barton?
His name was Ramsey Barton, which, of course, George can relate to. Right, George?
Well, he must have been named after Cal, right?
Well, he was.
Of course.
Wow.
I didn't know that, but it was an easy connection.
Hal asked for my address so I could send it. So I live on Ramsey Road in Yardley. And so Hal said to me, hey, man, Cal Ramsey and George Yardley. I said, yeah, well, I remember both those guys.
Oh,
yeah.
And very sadly, Ramsey just passed away a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, did he?
Oh.
He was 86, yeah.
You know, I was a freshman my first semester at NYU, and I'm sitting in the cafeteria all alone. The cafeteria used to be down in the basement of the main building, and before they built Loeb Student Center. And I'm sitting there all alone, and a guy comes up to me with his tray, and he says, "You mind if I sit down next to you?" And it was Cal Ramsey, and I'm thinking,
"Oh my God, wow.
Do I mind? Are you kidding?"
Yeah. Cal had some terrible health.
Yeah, he was such a nice guy. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Well, not Cal Ramsey. He didn't pass away.
Oh,
Frank Ramsey, the old.
Oh, Frank Ramsey. Oh, yeah, that I knew. Yes.
Yeah, he was
Frank
86.
Ramsey.
Yeah.
Oh, thank God Cal is still with us then.
Me too. Thank goodness. Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
I never had lunch with Frank Ramsey.
At least we have Havlicek.
Neither did I.
Well, Frank Ramsey does.
Yeah.
Hey guys, good show. Thank you for doing it week after week. I really appreciate it. It's the highlight.
Well, I hope our bonus checks are in the mail.
Yeah.
They are.
This is the show I enjoy the most.
I'm going to go to my Pro Keds budget, see what I get to give you.
Okay.
Yeah, see if you get a discount on some shoes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, I enjoyed it, everybody. Thank you.
Okay, me too. Take care.
Thank you, gentlemen.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. Adios, everybody.